VIP. Let's kick it.
Ice, ice, baby. Ice, ice, baby.
Alright, stop, collaborate and listen. Ice is back with my brand new invention. Something grabs a hold of me tightly, flow like a harpoon daily and nightly.
Will it ever stop?
Yo, I don't know. Turn off the lights and I'll glow. To the extreme, I rock a mic like a vandal. Light up a stage and wax a chump like a candle. Dance, crush a speaker that booms. I'm killing your brain like a poisonous mushroom. Deadly, when I play a dope melody. Anything less than the best is a felony. Love it or leave it, you better gain weight. You better hit bullseye, the kid don't play. If there was a problem, yo, I'll solve it. Check out the hook while my DJ revolves it.
Hello again, Metas, and welcome back to the channel. In today's guide, I'll be showcasing my brand new Abyss Glance Frost Vortex build, updated from the last patch. With the recent rework changing how Frost Vortex functions and how Abyss Glance interacts, I decided it was finally time to bring the Abyss Glance back out of the closet. So with that being said, sit back, relax, and enjoy. So let's start things off by looking at the changes to the Abyss Glance and how the weapon used to function. Previously, the Abyss Glance would trigger Frost Vortex after 14 hits, with the weak spot hit counting as 2. The closer to the center of the Frost Vortex, the higher the damage, scaling up to an impressive 250%. On top of that, it would provide a flat 30% frost damage bonus. Now the Abyss Glance function is hitting enemies triggers Frost Vortex with a 7-second cooldown, which is reduced by 0.5 seconds for every hit you land. When triggered against metahumans, Frost Vortex deals 30% more damage. Additionally, the Frost Vortex damage frequency has plus 100%, and hitting a non-metahuman unit within a Frost Vortex increases the final damage of Frost Vortexes you create by 5%, stacking up to 10 times. The plus 30% frost damage bonus remains as well. This rework makes Abyss Glance much more dynamic. Now let's take a look at the Frost Vortex changes. Before the update, Frost Vortex created a track with a 4.5 meter radius that dealt 30% psi intensity as status damage every second for 4 seconds, totaling 4 ticks. This meant each Frost Vortex dealt 120% psi intensity in total, and since you could have up to 2 Vortexes active at once, the maximum potential damage was 240% psi intensity. After the update, Frost Vortex still has a 4.5 meter radius, but now it deals 50% psi intensity every 0.5 seconds for 4 seconds, resulting in 8 ticks. This brings the total damage per Vortex to 400% psi intensity. However, you can now only have 1 Vortex active at a time. Despite this limitation, the overall damage output is significantly higher, an increase from 240% to 400%, which is roughly 66% more total damage. On top of that, Frost Vortex can now be generated in mid-air, and the damage is applied instantly upon creation, making it far more responsive and deadlier than before. Next up is the calibration. For this build, I've chosen to go with heavy style calibration, combined with a double elemental suffix for the extra magazine capacity. The alternative option would be a rapid shot with double elemental, but the trade-off here is significant. With rapid shot, you'll find yourself reloading much more often, which can be a problem because the Abyss Glance is a fast-firing auto weapon. In my experience, rapid shot tends to force reloads at critical moments when you'd really benefit from having a few extra bullets. That said, this ultimately comes down to personal preference. If you're confident in managing reloads, rapid shot can still be a very viable option. For my accessories, I'm using a range compensator for the muzzle, compact reflex sight for the optic, angular grip for my tactics, extended rifle mag for the magazine, and disintegrating rifle AP ammo. This gives you a grand total stability of 73, accuracy of 58, range of 63, and a reload speed of 25. For my secondary, I've decided to go for the bingo. 70% chance to trigger the bullseye upon hitting a weak spot. After switching weapons, the first hit will trigger the bullseye. After hitting a non-metahuman unit, weak spot damage plus 25% for 10 seconds, stacking up to 4 times. After defeating a non-metahuman unit with a weak spot hit, attack plus 15% for 20 seconds. For the bingo's calibration, you want to run a rapid shot style with double weak spot suffix. And for the accessories, I'm using the large brake for the muzzle, advanced sniper sight for the optic, tactical SR mag for the magazine, and tungsten SR AP ammunition. This gives me a grand total stability of 83, accuracy of 86, range of 80, and a reload speed of 57. And for my melee weapon, I am running the Kukuri. Defeating the target grants all weapons attack plus 30% and crit rate plus 15% for 10 seconds. When defeating an enemy with a heavy strike, psi intensity plus 20% and restores HP by 200% of psi intensity. So during my raw damage test, I managed to hit a high peak of 73,000 DPS and consistently keep the DPS within that range. Here you can take a look at my raw stats. Next, we're going to damage test when fully buffed. When fully buffed, this build reaches some insane numbers. My highest DPS spike hits an impressive 486,741, and by the end of a full rotation, I rack up a total damage output of around 3,396,125. Next, we have fully buffed with the Snowspire Deviant. With this variant, I hit a peak DPS of 326,520 and a total damage output of 1,863,707. Next is the Cradle. Feel free to pause at any time to read what they state. I'd like to take a quick moment to give a massive thank you to all my old and new subscribers, as well as everyone who's been watching my videos. I truly appreciate all the feedback and support you have given. It really means a lot. If you haven't yet subscribed and you're enjoying the content, consider hitting that subscribe button so you don't miss out on any more Once Human guides. On that note, let's jump back in and continue. So now let's take a look at the foods and the drinks that we can use to really maximize the DPS. For the first food buff, I'm running mixed fried hot dog, used to increase damage by 20% towards enemies affected by the bullseye. For this, you'll need any one piece of meat, 2 deviated mushrooms, and 2 corn oil. I advise using deer meat as it gives you an extra 2% damage against enemies affected by bullseye. If you can, try and get hold of the Mimeric Advanced Stove Gourmand for the following buffs. Dishes made at the Advanced Stove gain base effect plus 30%, effect duration plus 50%, and crafting time of minus 50%. For my next food buff, I've chosen to use the layered galaxy cake, which you can find a recipe for in Starfall crates. This buff grants a 30% elemental bonus while airborne, which is huge for maximizing damage. To maintain this buff, all you'll need to do is stay airborne by performing continuous jumps. However, if you don't like that playstyle, you can instead use the Gravity Neuralizer tactical item, whose formulas can also be obtained from Starfall crates. This alternative not only grants the same buff, but also pairs perfectly with the 2 mods I've included in this build, making it an excellent choice for a more grounded playstyle. To make the layered galaxy cake, you just need to use 1 wheat, 1 milk, 5 gravity crystals, and 1 butter. Now, I'd advise using cow milk as this is the only milk that doesn't affect your sanity. Next, for our drink buffs, we're using Whimsical Drink, used to gain 25% status damage bonus. For this, you'll need 1 deviated saffron, 1 normal saffron, 5 purified water, and 5 ice cubes. As mentioned before, there's a couple ways to increase these buffs even further. So, Advanced Stove Gourmand, again, dishes made at the stove gain a base effect of plus 30%, effect duration plus 50, and crafting time of minus 50%. But especially with Whimsical Drink, you want to get hold of the Ice Treat Brain Freeze. Ice Treat effect duration plus 200% and a potency of plus 30%. And for the last buff, I'm using Stardust Energy Drink, used to gain the double jump ability for 30 seconds. For this, you'll need 2 saffron, 5 purified water, 5 sugar, and 3 aluminum ingots. So the reason to why I'm running Stardust Energy Drink is because when you activate the double jump, you can activate the tactical leap from your Cradle. For every 1 second spent airborne, gain 20% damage against Deviants and 10% damage against their shields for 3 seconds, up to 60 seconds. Next, let's take a look at the Deviants and the Polar Jelly in particular, as this has had a rework with the latest Frost update. So let's take a look at the Polar Jelly. The old Polar Jelly gave you continuously deals Frost status damage to surrounding enemies and forces them to move towards you, increasing Frost damage received by surrounding targets by 36%. If Frost Vortexes are summoned inside the radius, create additional ice spikes. So with the update, everything stays the same. but they've gave us a 3.2% increase, so now we get 39.2%. Our second deviant is the Snow Sprite. I'm using the Lunar Oracle version. Generate ice crystals near the target every 3 seconds. Ice crystals shatter when shot, dealing 100% frost damage to nearby targets and causing them to take plus 48% frost damage. Again, I like to use the Snow Sprite when I'm running silos in dense locations, and the Polar Jelly for when you're running against stationary targets. So now let's take a look at some armor set combinations that really benefit the style of this gun. So for the first armor set, it's going to be Treacherous Tides. For a 3-piece, we get weapon damage reduction of 10%. When HP is below 70%, weapon damage and status damage plus 12%. And the HP reduction from low sanity is decreased by 40%. Weapon and status damage plus 10%, and further increases as your sanity drops, up to 28% at 30% max sanity. For my 2-piece set, I've decided to go with 2-piece of Shellia for status damage reduction of 15% and elemental damage plus 8%. And for the key armor, I'm going to be running the Frost Tactical Vest. So the old version, Frost Vortex generates ice spikes that do 100% psi intensity as frost damage. So with the rework, they gave us an extra 20%. So now we get 120% psi intensity. So now let's take a look at the mods that we're paired with the armor sets. For the Abyss Glance, I'm running the Cryoblast mod with the Frost Vortex suffix. After triggering Frost Vortex, it increases Frost Vortex damage by plus 4% up to 5 stacks, lasting for 4 seconds, with the aptitude effects of Frost Vortex damage plus 6%, Frost damage plus 6%, damage against normal enemies plus 4%, and head damage reduction plus 4.8%. For the Bingo, I am running Vulnerability Amplifier with the Bullseye suffix. The Bullseye adds vulnerability plus 8%, with the weak spot damage on targets with the Bullseye plus 12%, weapon damage reduction of 6%, damage against normal enemies of 4%, and damage against elite enemies of 4.5%. For my helmet mod, I am running Deviations Expert with the Lunar suffix. Range minus 25%, fire rate plus 10%, and status damage plus 20%, with the aptitude effects of damage against normal enemies plus 6%. The lower your HP, the higher your elemental damage up to 16%. The lower your HP, the higher your status damage up to 9.6%. And finally, the lower your HP, the higher your damage reduction against Deviants up to 7.2%. For my mask, I am running the Frostwave Wither with Frost Vortex suffix. Frost Vortex final damage plus 30%, decreasing by 8% per second over time, with the aptitude effects of Frost Vortex damage 4.8%, damage against Great Ones plus 3.6%, damage against normal enemies of 10%, and frost damage plus 6%. For my chest piece, I'm running the Ardent Shield Lunar suffix. While the shield is active, you gain 15% damage reduction. When the shield exceeds 1,000 single instances of damage, will not penetrate the shield. Aptitude effects. The lower your HP, the higher your damage reduction against Deviants up to 9.6%. Damage against Great Ones of 2.4%. The lower your HP, the higher your elemental damage up to 16%. And finally, the lower your HP, the higher your status damage up to 12%. For my legs, I've decided to go with Elemental Resonance, but with the Downstar suffix. For each instance of elemental damage dealt from the previous magazine, the next magazine gains elemental damage plus 1% for 15 seconds upon reloading up to 24%, with the aptitude effects of status damage plus 6%, increased by up to 3% against enemies standing at a lower level than yourself, max at 5 meters. This is why I said use the gravity neutralizer, as you're able to be higher than the enemy you're shooting. Elemental damage plus 6.4%, increased by up to 3.2% against enemies standing at a lower level than yourself. Damage against elite enemies of 4.5%, and weapon damage reduction of 3.6%. For the gloves, I've chosen to go with Elemental Overload, but with the talent suffix. Elemental damage, Blaze, Frost, Shock, and Blast plus 18%, with the aptitude effects of elemental damage plus 6.4%, status damage of 4.8%. Damage against normal enemies of 4%, and weapon damage reduction of 4.8%. For my shoes mod, I am running the Rush Hour, but with the Downstar suffix. Every 10% HP loss grants plus 4% melee, weapon, and status damage. Again, you can activate this by perma jumping or use the gravity neuralizer. Aptitude effects. Elemental damage plus 8% increased up to 4% against enemies standing at a lower level. Head damage reduction of plus 4.8%. Status damage plus 4.8% increased by up to 2.4% against enemies standing at a lower level than yourself. And damage against great ones plus 3.6%. And that brings us to the end of my Abyss Glance build guide. I want to give a massive thank you to all my old and new viewers and a special shout out to my subscribers. You guys are amazing. Your support means the world to me. If you're enjoying the content, please consider subscribing, leaving a like and dropping a comment below. I truly appreciate all the feedback and love hearing your thoughts. Thanks again for being part of this community, and I'll see you in the next one. Stay awesome, Mares.